Hey, everybody. I'm Jesse Cohen. This is the Royal Half Radio practice report. I attended LA Kings practice this morning at Toyota Sports Performance Center. The Kings were wearing red, white, and green, as they frequently do for the holidays. That's not really the point of this, though. What we're really here to do is talk about the trade of Phil Danault and what the outcome of that was at practice this morning. So if anybody has any questions they want answered specifically, go ahead and throw them in the comment section, or you can text them in 323-628-1008. I will read the questions and answer them. Otherwise, I'll just go through my notes from Ken Holland's media availability last night, and which is available on the Kings YouTube right now, by the way. I was just watching it again for a refresher. And also, we spoke to Jim Hiller this morning after practice. Now, Alex Turcotte and Trevor Moore were made available to the press. I stuck around for about half of Alex Turcotte's, and then I wanted to talk to some other players in the room, so I drifted away and I didn't hear what Trevor Moore had to say. But I imagine that he was probably said what everybody said, which is it's sad that Phil Danault is gone, but it was clearly something that needed to happen. LA Kings fan 819 says, "Do you think we flip the pick in a package for a player or hold on to it?" I have to believe that eventually the Kings will flip the pick, because I don't see a path forward without a replacement for Phil Danault. Right now, the center depth on this team is Anze Kopitar, Quentin Byfield, Alex Turcotte, and Sammy Helenius. And Ken Holland mentioned Alex Laferriere's name multiple times last night in his media availability as a potential candidate to play center. It's been talked about now for months. It's very clearly, to me anyway, something that the organization is trying to sort of soft launch and suggest is a possibility. And I don't think it's sane. I like Alex Laferriere. He's a great guy and a great player, but he's not a center. And Phil Danault, for all the lack of offense that he had this season, is still Phil Danault, and you can't just wave your magic wand and say, well, he didn't have any goals, so we can replace him with a winger who's never played center. I just don't think that's realistic. Johnny Utah says, at least my boy Helenius will finally get some time. I'm not sure that necessarily is true. I'm going to look up Sammy Helenius's playing time right now. Helenius will be in the lineup more often. That much is absolutely true, because they don't have any other center options. But it's up to Jim Hiller to play the players, whether or not he'll actually play them. And so just looking at Sammy Helenius's playing time over the last 4 games, which is the last 4 games that Phil Danault was out. In Calgary, Helenius played 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Against Dallas, he played 10 minutes and 51 seconds. So that's a fair amount of ice time. And then against Florida and Tampa Bay, he played less than 7 minutes, 6 minutes and 20 seconds basically in each game. So Helenius, will get more ice time, but how much ice time remains to be seen. Chad Wilson asks, who do you think takes the alternate captaincy now? That's a question that came up today when asked to Jim Hiller. I don't remember the exact answer, but the answer was essentially, there have been other candidates, and the team has a leadership group. But yeah, that's another thing that this trade, I don't think necessarily a ton of people thought about. You're trading an alternate captain halfway through the season who allegedly demanded a trade on a deadline. Said he wanted to be traded before the holiday freeze. Now, all of that is rumored. We don't know that is true, but it was not denied. And the timing of it suggests to me that, yeah, Phil Danault very clearly asked for a trade and wanted it done quickly. So it was done. In my opinion, who do I feel deserves the alternate captain? I mean, it's probably a toss-up between Adrian Kempe and Mikey Anderson. Both of them have worn the letter in the past. Anze Kopitar is the captain. Drew Doughty is the other alternate, and then they've sort of rotated out in different situations when somebody's missed a game because of injury or whatever. So it'll probably be Kempe or Anderson. I think it'll tell you a lot about, I don't know what, but it'll probably tell you a lot to see if they actually assign it to one person permanently. Sorry, I got lost, got off track there for a second, but Ken Holland did speak to the media last night. And again, the word evaluation, I think that's the word that was used, or maybe monitoring, or maybe some combination of both, was used multiple times last night. And it stood out to me because after the Adrian Kempe contract was signed, I asked Ken Holland at that media availability. That was obviously the priority item for the team, was to sign Adrian Kempe to an extension. And the question I asked Ken Holland at the quarter pull mark was, now that that's done, what is the next, what moves into that spot as your next highest priority? And what I was trying to imply was Brandt Clark's extension, but the answer we got was, now the priority is to evaluate and see where the team is. Well, a month went by, and that evaluation yielded that Phil Danault has to be traded. So now we're back in, okay, what's the next move now that you've traded Phil Danault? Do you trade the pick? Do you make another move? And the answer was, well, now we evaluate. Well, that's fine, and I think leadership should evaluate, but at some point, you know what your roster is, you know what the contract status of all the players on your roster are. So some measure of evaluation has to be moving to bolster the future. And Andre Kopitar is still retiring at the end of the year. And while I do think you need to keep an eye on this season and not let this season get out of control, you've just lost a veteran center for no roster replacement. And so, okay, yes, now we need to find out, will Alex Turcotte be a replacement candidate for Phil Danault? But, and I don't say this to disrespect Alex Turcotte at all, but Phil Danault had 5 points. Alex Turcotte has 6. So let's not pretend that we are replacing Phil Danault with a rock solid offensive replacement who's going to fundamentally change the identity. Like, I like Alex Turcotte. I hope Alex Turcotte is very good. I think Alex Turcotte has played very well given the minutes he's gotten. His faceoffs are good. I think he makes an excellent tandem with Trevor Moore, which is another conversation that can be had later. But like, Phil Danault is still Phil Danault, and you can't just lose a guy like that and wave your hand and be like, well, he didn't score any goals, so he's a bum, so thank God. Like, no, it's going to be more difficult than that. All right, sorry, getting into the comments. Do I think losing 24 lengthened Hiller's leash? I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think ultimately, if the team slips out of a playoff spot, that'll have more to do with it. And to be clear, I don't think they will. And I do want to talk about that more in a second. Johnny Utah says, got a high second and cleared 5.5 million and gives young players a shot. Not mad. Johnny, all due respect, I've met you many times. You know I like you. I think you're crazy, and I think that's the wrong takeaway from this. Cap space is only valuable if you use it, and draft picks are only useful if you are planning long term for the future. Right now, this team has to worry about the remaining 50 some games on the schedule. And you just lost a veteran center. There's 2 guys on this team that can win faceoffs, or there were 2 guys on this team, 3 guys that can win faceoffs on this team. Turcotte, Danault, and Kopitar. You just lost Danault, and you didn't replace him. I get it. His offense was struggling, and so that's not great. But you can't just erase it and say, well, now somebody, like, I just think that's I just think it's wrong. And I've told Johnny to his face, he's a lunatic plenty of times, so I don't feel like I'm being cruel or picking on him. Johnny Utah prioritizes a very specific type of play and has said to me multiple times that he would prefer the team lose and play that style than win and not play that style. So that's what we're talking about. Matt says, I'm too optimistic, but I can't help but think of this as a step back this year and 2 steps forward next year. We have 10 draft picks and Carter George coming to Ontario. Sure, that could be one way of looking at it. But my question is, if this is 1 step back this year and 2 steps forward next year, what does that mean for this year? Like, this is Andre Kopitar's final season. I just don't believe that the organization will throw in the towel like that. Whether or not that's the correct move strategically for the long run, I don't know. But if you're going to trade Phil Danault for a 2nd round pick, and the argument is, well, we are building cap space and draft capital for the offseason, well, why not trade all sorts of players? Why sign Adrian Kempe to an 8-year extension at a huge number if you're going to think about, hoarding draft picks and cap space? Like, it's not that isn't a solid take. It's just that it doesn't match with the other moves that are being made. Nelly says, how am I doing? I know Phil wasn't a backup goalie, but you've always said he was one of my favorites. I'm fine. Maybe this is just my own personal mental illness, but listen, I do like Phil Danault as a person. And I would argue that I am friends with Phil Danault. I'll say that now that he's no longer here. And I don't know, he probably doesn't watch this and he can contest it if he wants. But yes, I like Phil Danault. I am friends with Phil Danault, friendly with Phil Danault. So obviously I have a huge bias on this. Having said that, Phil Danault doesn't play for the Kings anymore. And I'm a lunatic and I care about the Kings. So good luck to Phil. I'm not rooting for the Canadiens. I'll never root for the Canadiens. I hope he is happy. I hope his family is happy. I hope his dog is happy. I desperately want to know what happened. I don't know what happened. I haven't asked him yet. But something happened. And I don't believe the sort of lazy, typical sports reporting accounts of what happened. And I'll get into that later. Caleb says, hear me out. More a top prospect, a first and a second for Shen and Kairu. Okay, like fine, but I still am not sure how that fixes anything. I guess you get Shen to replace Danault and Moore to replace Kairu, but you're giving up a first and a second to do it. And it doesn't address the core issue, which is why did this happen? That's the main thing for me is like, why did this happen? How did it get here? Why did it happen? And I don't know the answer to that. And I would very much like to. Johnny says, pay Clark. Pay Clark to what? To be the second, sometimes third pair defenseman? Like, okay, fine, Johnny. That's sorry. I'm getting mad at Johnny. It's not fair. There's others beside Johnny that want to hear me talk. Do you believe what the org says about their outlook of the team? There's no way they don't see the bigger issues at hand. I don't know, Bell on Twitter. I don't know. I had a conversation with somebody this morning and I commented about something that Ken Holland said in last night's media availability. And the person confronted me about it and said, so are you saying Ken Holland is a liar? And I said, no, but there are multiple ways of saying things that aren't true that don't have to be lies. If I tell you something that isn't true and then you repeat it, you're not lying. You're just saying something that isn't true that you heard. And maybe shame on you for repeating something that wasn't true. If I give you my opinion, if I say to you, oh, the new Knives Out movie sucks, and then you go tell somebody that it sucks without having seen it yourself, are you lying? I don't know. You didn't see it yourself. You're just going off of my opinion, and my opinion is just an opinion. So who knows? When do I believe what the organization says about their outlook of the team? I believe that the organization believes some of the stuff that they say. When Ken Holland and Jim Hiller talk to the media and they say, I think one phrase that stood out to me last night was Ken Holland says, if the Kings are in a malaise, everybody else is in a malaise too. Because look, this, you look at the standings, everybody's bunched up. I think the organization believes that. I think that's a crazy way to look at sports. And I've argued this multiple times over the years about special teams when people would say, oh, the power play is ranked 25th and now it's ranked 15th. I go, okay, but it's only ranked 25th or 15th or wherever it's ranked because of where the other teams are. Ranking isn't a reflection of how good or bad something is. Ranking is just a reflection of how good or bad it is, while as compared to other things. So, okay, the rest of the league is in a malaise. So what? If the rest of the team wakes up and snaps out of their malaise, but you're still in your malaise, you're humped. So, like saying, yeah, we're struggling, but everybody else is struggling, so it's not a concern, is not a comforting thing to me. But do I believe they think that way? Yes, I do. I do believe that they believe that. I just think it's not a great way to think of things. Like your goal as a hockey team, as anything, a person, an organization, a team, if you're if you're painting a painting, I don't care. Your job should be to try and do it to the best of your abilities, not look over at what the person next to you is doing and say, well, they suck too, so I guess I'm fine. Like I don't like that. Kaya says Holland answered a question regarding Hiller's future this season in his media availability. He did. He said he expects Jim Hiller to finish the season here, which is precisely what a general manager has to say. But if this were the NFL, there would be tons of people winking and laughing and saying they know exactly what that means. And I'm going to leave that at that. Johnny says, Jesse, it wasn't just Danault's offensive that dried up. He was invisible and taken off. The power play and minutes dwindled and even sat a few games in the third. It just wasn't working. I agree, Johnny. It wasn't just his lack of offense. He was obviously not playing well. My point is just, he didn't break a leg. He didn't, turn 50. Like if he goes to Montreal and starts playing better, I think you have to then investigate the possibility that it wasn't exclusively his fault. And people who want to look at the player and say, well, he wasn't playing well, so he's a bum, so good riddance. I just think that's an incredibly shallow interpretation of events. And I've seen a lot of people have that reaction. And listen, obviously I'm biased. Obviously I'm going to have that strong of an approach about Phil Danault, but I will say the same thing of any player who leaves. I'll say that I have said the same thing about Jordan Spence, and I had, I talked to Jordan in the locker room, but I wouldn't consider us friendly. But when a player departs, when a player demands a trade, And it was not confirmed that Danault demanded a trade, but it was very strongly supported that he would have. When a player asks to be moved, and there are rumors swirling that he is asked to be moved by a specific day on the calendar, something happened. And it wasn't just, oh, he stopped playing well, so it had to be done. Like, yeah, okay, why did he stop playing well? What happened? Sean says, big fan of LaFerrier's tape socks. Yeah, the tape socks were very funny at practice today. I took a picture of Quentin Byfield's. I don't know if anybody saw it on Twitter, but it was like a smiley face and a weird shape. And Joel Edmondson had a weird design, and Brant Clark had green and red swapped, or maybe it was red and I don't remember who was wearing what color socks. But yeah, Alex LaFerriere, Warren Fogle, and Quentin Byfield were the clear winners. Joel Edmondson, Brant Clark, a couple more guys had some interesting sock jobs. Love the well, thank you, Living Things 280. Yes, I agree. So somebody said also, I hate Hiller's press conference. We're doing all the right things. We just have to get lucky. That is not an acceptable approach. There's first of all, there's the phrase, the great ones make their own luck. And yeah, you can't like, sorry, I'm so flustered now. I'm ahead of my own thoughts. There's a difference between a goal and a plan. And the Kings have had a goal. The goal is to win the Stanley Cup. We all know that. But the plan has to account for things not going your way, right? You hope for the best, you plan for the worst. And I was talking to somebody on the Discord last night, I think about 2014. And if you look at the 2014 team, which required 7 game 7s to win the cup, which means in my mind, it was a more impressive win than 2012, but not a better win than 2012. Because 2012, they came in, bullied everybody, dummied everybody, and took it. 2014, things went wrong. Players got hurt. Matt Green wasn't available. Robin Regeer got hurt. They relied on, was it Keaton Ellerby? No. Justin, I don't even remember. Schultz? I don't remember all the players, but they required way more depth. They had Justin Williams on the third line. Like, that team had depth. This team now has sacrificed its depth on the hope that what happened last year for the last 32 games of that season would work out perfectly this year. And when it didn't, now we're talking about Alex LaFerriere as a center, a guy who wasn't intended to make the team 2 years ago, but came in and because of what happened with Kaliev and some injuries, got ice time and then impressed enough, but was a winger. And now we're talking about him as if it was always going to make sense that he's a center. And like, I don't believe that. You have a 5th overall pick and a 2nd overall pick drafted to be centers, not to mention Akil Thomas, Rasmus Kupari, Gabe Velarde, all the guys that have been shipped out. And that's what we're left with. Like, no, that's not a plan. There's no chance that was the plan. And if it was, it's an insane plan. So I don't know what the point of that was. I just wanted to go on a rant. Caleb says, I think it might be with Phil struggling. He probably had a big negative reaction to being pulled from Power Play 2. I'm not sure that he was pulled from Power Play 2 until after he missed a game in Calgary. I don't remember when that happened, but I will say this. This is a perfect opportunity for me to say this, Caleb. And listen, I'm just in a scolding mood, so everybody get ready to be scolded. I think sports fans think that athletes are somehow deeply, fundamentally different than other people, and I'm telling you they're not. Are they harder working than your average bear? I don't know, maybe some of them are, but they're motivated by the same stuff. And so people, this thing that's come out that's like, oh, well, Phil was just mad because his minutes dropped, and that's why he wanted to leave, because he's a diva and he couldn't handle his minutes being ripped away. So what you're telling me is that a guy who was the heart and soul of the team in 2021-22, who was an alternate captain, right, was respected enough by the organization and his teammates to be an alternate captain, always spoken well of, clearly a happy, cheerful guy, was praised as being one of the best players in the playoffs last year. Over the course of 28 games or 30 games, went from being perfectly happy to stick around to being a petulant, whiny diva baby because he got less than a minute reduction in ice time. On what planet? Like, what are you talking about? That is not how human beings work. There's no chance that he was fine in September, but done in December because he got slightly fewer minutes. That's crazy. That's not believable. I don't know what happened. I don't know how long this was coming, but I have reason to believe that I won't go into that this was brewing over time. And it's just not, I just don't believe it. And I get mad when I see it. Like, that's lunacy. That's the way that people talk about sports athletes, as if they're characters in a Greek tragedy. Like, no, no, I don't believe it. Maybe it's true, but I don't believe it. And I would have to be told that it's true before I believed it. And I'd have to be told repeatedly. All right. So going through, Holden says the Danault situation was strange. I wonder why he specifically wanted out. I have theories I'm not going to get into because I don't, like I've said before, I don't think it's responsible. But as somebody who worked there, and as somebody who goes in the locker room repeatedly, and as somebody who is friendly with players in the locker room, I have suspicions. I have theories. I think this is the end result of a lot of stuff that's been building over time. I don't think this came out of nowhere. Um, but I don't know what happened. It does remind me, it's totally different from 2018-19, because 2018-19 we didn't hear anything. The floor just fell out. And this time we're starting to hear stuff. The floor still hasn't fallen out, but you know, I was watching a video on TikTok this morning that was talking about, sometimes changes happen slowly and then you start to see cracks, and then all of a sudden, like, the change happens. So I'm hoping that this isn't a precursor to some sort of levee breaking, but I think it's concerning. I think it has to be concerning. And anybody, like I said, anybody who views this as a net positive, I think you're crazy. It could be that you're right. I think you're crazy. Me personally, it's just my opinion. I think anybody who looks at this as a net positive is a lunatic. Matt says, can't wait for the royally bad takes on Monday. You can make a whole show out of them. Yeah, well, I feel like I've yelled enough about them right now. Living Thing says, this is on the players. They're normal guys. Something happened with Phil. Man, it's very suspicious. Yeah, it is. And, I talked about this after the game against Tampa, I think, but I'll talk about it again. There's just weird details. There's language that I've never heard before. So Ken Holland last night said Phil Danault didn't play against Calgary at home because he had the stomach flu. Okay, I take that at his word. That sounds right. But then he said that he spoke to Alan Walsh about Phil not going on the trip, and that Phil and Byfield couldn't travel on the trip because they were sick. So I believe that they were sick. Quentin Byfield joined the team in Florida against the Panthers, I believe, but wasn't there for Dallas. So I'm 100% on board with believing that Byfield and Danault were sick. Lots of guys getting sick. If somebody's really that sick, you don't want them on the plane, in the locker room, getting other guys sick. So I buy that. But mentioning that he talked to the agent about whether or not the player would travel at the same time as rumors are swirling that a guy demanded a trade. And Ken Holland said he talked to Alan Walsh a lot over the last few weeks. And it's unique. I've just never heard a GM talk about a player like that. Now, the last time I can remember that a player demanded a trade was Ryan Smith, which was, what was that, 15 years ago? And I certainly wasn't as involved in the industry as I am now. So I don't remember the rhetoric surrounding that one. But it's unique. It's interesting. And that, again, I won't use the word suspicious, but I will say it's conspicuous. The whole thing is odd. Dan, the Kings fan 105 says Danault leaving is definitely a sign of deep issues. Yeah, I think it is. Why? Like, when Phil Danault arrived, and Zach Dooley and I talked about this on our emergency trade podcast, which is available on all the Kings men. And Zach, I think, was the one who brought it up and mentioned it. But when the first time we interviewed Phil Danault, when they signed him as a free agent in the summer of 2021, I think, he said, with the right culture, you can beat anybody. And I believe that's the kind of guy Phil is. I believe he believes that. I believe he lives that. I talked extensively about the importance of Phil Danault to that locker room, the power of friendship, the 2021-22 season where they came out of nowhere and made the playoffs despite nobody expecting it. For that guy to go from with the right culture, you can beat anybody, to rumors swirling that he wanted to be traded and wanted to be traded right now, and it to be very clear from the coach to the GM to teammates that there was something going on, and he was unhappy and he wasn't thrilled and he wanted to leave. And the solution people are providing is that it's because he was mad about his ice time. Like, no, sorry, I'm going to keep going back to that. It's like I said, it has to be concerning. Maybe Phil was the loudest about concerns with Hiller's mistakes dating back to last season. Maybe, I don't know. I'm betting this is all stemming from last season's playoff debacle. Listen, I will say this to the person who made that comment. Phil Danault changed his agent. I don't remember when he actually changed it. Let me see if I can find a date on that. But Phil Danault changed agents in the middle of the current um, contract, and he's on a 6-year contract, and he changed agents. Sorry, I'm trying to Google to find out when it was. I can't remember if it was last year or in the off season, but I asked Phil Danault. It must have been during the season because I asked him. I asked him if when the change happened, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, um, if that change of agent meant that he wanted a trade, because that was my thought. It was like, why do you change agents in the middle of a 6-year contract? It seemed odd to me at the time. At the time, Phil Danault assured me that he was not interested in the trade, and that had nothing to do with it. I am now curious, looking back on it, like, was that when this started? I don't know, and I probably shouldn't have told that story. So apologies to Phil Danault now for having said it. But yeah, I don't know. Roadhog says, do you think this is something specific to Phil, or is there a bigger locker room issue? I don't think there's a locker room issue in the sense that, like, we've heard rumors about teams in the past where one teammate slept with another teammate's wife, and or somebody owed somebody money or whatever. I don't think there's anything like that. The guys seem to get along. I certainly haven't heard anything like that. You would think, with all of the rumors that were going around the Arthur Kaliev story earlier this year, if there was something poisonous in the locker room, you think you would have heard about it, or you think you'd be able to see it. Like, for example, the year that Pierre-Luc Dubois was here, going to the locker room, everybody seemed to get along. I saw Jordan Spence, Quentin Byfield, and Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Anze Kopitar, and Adrian Kempe. They all sat near each other. They joked around. They played around. They seemed to like each other. I don't think it's a locker room issue. I don't think there's a chemistry issue between the guys. But something's going on, and I don't know what it is. Johnny says, interesting that both Danault and Gavrikov wanted out under Hiller. Well, listen, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about that connection. We don't know that Gavrikov, quote unquote, wanted out. He was an unrestricted free agent, and he didn't sign here. So that could be anything. I have heard all sorts of crazy rumors about why Gavrikov left, from he wanted to be closer geographically to Russia, to he didn't appreciate his playing time being reduced after Drew Doughty came back, and everything in between. I don't know if any of it is believable. I've never spoken to Gavrikov about it. I've never spoken to his agent about it. I've never spoken to team management about it. All I know is that he did leave. So I don't know. Dan the Kings fan says, locker room leader center to shut down line with Fogues and more Danault, and his playoff performance was fantastic. Yeah. And one of the things that Jim Hiller talked about this morning, because I asked him, was Moore and Danault have been a tandem for 4 years now, 4.5 years, whether it was with Arvidsson or Fogle or Fiala on the penalty kill, on the second power play unit, whatever it is. Trevor Moore and Phil Danault have been a tandem. And the modern state of hockey, which I think is weird, is that teams tend to lump guys into tandems rather than trios. So Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe are a tandem. Quentin Byfield and Warren Fogle, they don't really play 5-on-5 that much anymore, but they were for a while, and they have been on the penalty kill. And then Moore and Danault. So now that Danault's gone, what happens to Trevor Moore? Does his ice time get reduced? Does his role on the team suffer because Phil Danault's gone? Or do they find a new partner for him? And the answer we got from Jim Hiller was, basically, he said, like, that's their number one priority right now as a coaching staff, is trying to figure out a new set of tandems. But he did say that Alex Turcotte would not be acquiring more penalty killing time, which I thought was interesting, since Phil Danault doesn't kill as many penalties as he used to, but he was playing over a minute per game on the PK. And Alex Turcotte, I was arguing Alex Turcotte should get those minutes anyway before the trade, because he's been playing well and he wins faceoffs. But apparently I was actually stunned that I got a straight yes or no answer out of a straight yes or no question. Usually when you ask a yes or no question, you get, sort of mealy-mouthed answering the question that they wish you asked. Like last night, Ken Holland was asked directly, did Phil Danault request a trade? We didn't get a yes or a no answer. We got a very long answer that heavily implied to me that clearly, yes, he did, but we didn't get a yes or no. So when I asked Jim Miller today whether or not Alex Turcotte would be a candidate, I was taking a gamble on a yes or no answer, but got a yes or no answer. So that sort of caught me off guard. Do you think it was related to the Kings having Bergevin? Wasn't he the one that refused to re-sign Danault in Montreal originally? I don't know. I have heard that rumor. I have no idea if it's true or not. I very much doubt that it is, because if it was having to do with Bergevin, Bergevin came to LA very shortly after Phil Danault. I don't remember the exact timeline, but if Phil Danault was just really an anti-Bergevin guy, this would have happened 3 years ago. So, I mean, it's a convenient story, but I don't. Maybe I don't know. Like, I don't want to say definitively yes or no about things I don't know, but the math on that one doesn't add up to me. Kings fan says, "Tell me what I want to hear. Tell me it's on the coaching staff." Listen, at the end of the day, everything's on the coaching staff except for stuff that is on the general manager. That's the truth of it. Like, at the end of the day, it's all on management. That's how life works. That's how hierarchies work. That's how authority works. You have systems in place. This is why I mentioned the other game when somebody asked about reporters. That's why, to me, a reporter is only a reporter if there's an editor. Otherwise, you're just a blogger, and that's the difference. So, yeah, if Phil Danault was not performing well and Andrei Kuzmenko has not been performing well and the team's in a malaise, as the general manager said, and they're on a 94-point pace and the power play is terrible and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, there are people who are paid to control those things and who are responsible for those things. And if those things all collectively are failing, yeah, that's who it's on. Now, having said that, the penalty kill has been great, the defense has been great, and the goaltending's been great. And that is also on the coaching staff. So I don't know. Holden says, sounds like a really bad situation organizationally if a guy like Danault wanted out that badly. Yes, now we're just rehashing old things. But yes, that's my position, is that it is concerning. I don't know why it happened. I want to know why it happened. Until I know why it happened, I'm going to try and give everybody the benefit of the doubt and not freak out about it. But I'm still upset about 2018-19. I still want to know what happened that season, because every explanation that is given, this is sports. The simple explanations that are always given to me are always lazy and not satisfactory. And so, for example, just to pick on Johnny again, Johnny said Ryan Smith said Manhattan Beach was too dangerous. LOL. Nah, he didn't. He wasn't talking about Manhattan Beach. I think he lived in Manhattan Beach. And even if he gave some dumb quote about LA being too dangerous or Manhattan Beach being too dangerous, listen, who am I to tell a guy where he should live and raise his family? It's not my job. I do think it's a shame when somebody signs a long-term contract and then demands a trade, but I also think it's a shame that we live in a world where you can sign a contract with one team and then that team can just arbitrarily turn around and decide to trade your contract and send you to a city that you didn't want to go play for. Or in the case of like Ryan Getzlaf, this video I watched the other day, I mentioned on the postgame, if you're a player who's, Ryan Getzlaf signed a 1 year, like imagine you're Corey Perry. I won't talk about Ryan Getzlaf. If you're Corey Perry and you sign a 1 year deal, and you could have signed loads of other places, who knows how much money he could have gotten playing for other places. Maybe he could have gone and signed with the Ducks. Who knows? But if you sign a deal with a team and then the team suddenly pivots in the middle of your season, let's say a coach does get fired. Well, that's kind of, it sucks for you, right? Like, you signed a contract based on a bunch of promises, and then those promises don't wind up being true. The whole thing is, it's a mess. I don't think the coaches have lost the locker room, says LA Kings fan 818. And I'll tell you why I don't think the coaches have lost the locker room. Because the team is still playing defense, killing penalties, and they're getting solid goaltending. If the coach loses the locker room, and I haven't been watching the Toronto Maple Leafs, so all I can go on is Steve Dangle's videos. But based on what I hear out of Toronto Maple Leafs fans, that sounds like a coach who's lost the locker room. Because what I'm hearing is that the players aren't playing hard. They're not trying. They look listless and disinterested. I don't think the Kings look listless and disinterested. I just think they look lost 50% of the time. So and I felt the same way in 2016-17 when Daryl Sutter, the year that Daryl Sutter was fired, everyone said Sutter has lost the room. Didn't believe it, because the team was still playing exactly the way he wanted them to play. They changed the way they played defense in front of Peter Budaj. it wasn't good enough, and there were other things going on, and that's why Daryl Sutter lost his job. But I don't believe it was because he lost the room. I don't even know what lost the room means necessarily, but whatever. Power of friendship, yes, I believe that is why. No, Justin Cravens, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not going to Ontario tonight because I would have to leave right now. And full disclosure, I got some test results from a PET scan I had last week, and I'm getting the results on Monday, but they sent me the results, and now I'm all paranoid about that. So I'll probably spend most of the rest of the day feeding my test results into different AI chatbots and having them try to interpret them for me before I talk to my doctor on Monday. So that's probably what the rest of the day goes. When Blake spoke about being uncomfortable, I didn't realize he meant how we'd feel about the makeup of this team. Yeah, well, listen, that's one of those things where that to me was a really impressive moment in Blake's tenure as general manager. He stood up and basically threw the team under the bus, and they made some roster changes. They brought in certain players, and then all through the season, I felt Blake's hands firmly on the wheel. When things happened, he would come in and say, no, we're going to see this, we're going to see that. And it worked. And the team looked really good down the stretch. And then he left. And I'm actually mad about that. And I will not be mad about that. He just bailed. He just said, oh, you know what? Team sucked and somebody has to pay for it. So even though the team isn't going to make me pay for it, I choose to fall on my own sword. Well, cool. You fell on your own sword, but nobody else did. And now whatever good work you had done in putting in the roster is, so what? You just left. You just said, you know what? This didn't go the way I wanted it to. So I'm out for the third time. I'm done. I'm leaving. Peace. Sorry, mad about that. Colin Fraser is Brad Smith's biggest fan. That's probably true. Did they know all summer Danault wanted out? He probably would have been worth more before his bad play. I don't know the answer to that. My suspicion is that no, he probably didn't want out during the summer. My suspicion, based on what I know of Phil Danault and what we saw at the start of the season and training camp, is that Phil Danault probably wanted to win and wanted to help this team win. He said repeatedly when asked, he believed that the roster was capable of more. I don't know. I don't know, and I wish I did, and I will try to find out. I have texted multiple people involved in this whole debacle. Full disclosure, some of them have gotten back to me, some of them have not. I'm trying to figure out what happened. For right now, I have no idea, but I just don't believe that it was this simple, oh, he didn't get playing time, or he's playing badly, so he's crying in the corner. Like, I don't think so. Somebody says, I think Phil was expecting something and it didn't happen. An offseason coaching change, perhaps, that obviously didn't occur. Again, I don't think that it was that. I don't think it was offseason. I think it's possible that he had very strong opinion. Well, I don't want to talk. I don't want to put words in his mouth. I have opinions. I have theories, but I don't know. And I don't want to just speculate wildly. Apologies if that's disappointing to people. But yeah, something happened that caused him to want to go elsewhere. I think it's absolutely insane that Hiller got brought back after how bad that playoff coaching performance was. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why Gavrikov left and Danault wanted to leave too. Don't know. All I know is the team played like, and again, this is part of my argument for why the coach hasn't lost the room. The idea that the coaches didn't tell the team to sit back and play solid defense in the playoffs against Edmonton is not believable to me. For multiple reasons. One, I've never seen a team like, we talk about the 1-3-1 all the time. The Kings were playing an 0-5-0. They were lining up in a 5-man line across the neutral zone with a lead in a playoff game, a series lead and a lead in the game. So like, I don't buy that. And if it was true, let's just say for the sake of argument that the coaching staff didn't tell the team to play a sit back, defensive oriented, totally changed the way they were playing the game from the 30-minute mark on, then it should have been the coaching staff changing players and saying to the players who were sitting back and not doing what they wanted to do, okay, you're not playing unless you play the way I tell you to, and then go play the players that they didn't play. So like, it doesn't hold up to scrutiny. It doesn't make any sense. I don't have any idea if that matters, but that's why I believe that the players do what the coach asked. And so, yeah, if players want, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, we know it's why Spence left, says Olden 9278. What we know about Spence is that Ken Holland said that he spoke to Spence and told Spence that he would be playing a 7th D role if he stayed. And as a result of that, he requested a trade. Now, as it turns out, he's being put in a similar situation in Ottawa. And a lot of people who love to be smug have said, including my dad, if you're watching, Dad, have said, ha, ha, ha. Jordan Spence isn't getting playing time in Ottawa either. So therefore, he's must not be any good. And everybody knows that it's not just the Kings. Well, Ottawa's in 7th place in the wild card standings in the East. So Ottawa's not doing that great either. So I'm not convinced that just because another bad team in a different conference is making the same mistake, that means that both teams are right. Like I don't. Anyway, whatever. But that's why Jordan Spence left. He's in the last year of his contract. He wanted the best opportunity to get playing time. Playing time leads to production. Production leads to compensation. I imagine his agent cared about that more than Spence did. I imagine Spence just wants to play. Was told he wouldn't, so that's why he wants to go. Did you see a body language difference with Phil in the locker room recently? I'm behind in the stream. Sorry if you already covered this. I didn't cover it, Caius. I Yeah, a little bit of a body line, but not drastic. He was still always cheerful and present. Um, I think multiple people have said that it was obvious that something was going on. Broadcasters, players, organizational people. It was pretty clear to anybody paying attention that something was happening. He wasn't his normal self body language wise. He wasn't like depressed or sullen or withdrawn. But yeah, this was clearly building for a while. And like I said, I just don't believe that it was, oh, he was getting 90 seconds fewer ice time than last year. And so he was pouting about that. I just don't believe that at all. In these walk-in videos Kings posted last year, Gabby and Phil walked in together, meaning they rode together. Maybe it was his reaction to I don't think it's as simple as that, but that's a good catch. That's interesting. That could have been the start. I mean, I don't know. I didn't actually know that, but I know that Phil Danault and Sean Dursey used to ride together, and there was a whole thing about coffee and their relationship, and that is where that was the foundational bond that I believed the power of friendship was built on, was Phil Danault and Sean Dursey. So now who knows? Maybe I don't know. John Jay says Danault is from Quebec. He may have wanted to go home for personal reasons. We'll never know, I guess. Yes, there's all sorts of things that we'll just never know. Phil Danault moved out here a few years ago with his family, and I had multiple conversations with him about Southern California and what it was like to live in Southern California and whether or not he felt like a Californian and how do you adapt to the traffic and, when all that stuff. He couldn't have known that he would get traded to Montreal. When you ask for a trade, you don't ask for a trade to a specific team, or maybe you do. I don't know, but I doubt that was this situation, especially since the second round pick coming back was the return. It's possible that he wanted to go specifically back to Montreal, but seems unlikely to me. It seems to me like he wanted a trade. Ken Holland said they tried to find a place that would be a good landing for him that would work with him, which they also said about Jordan Spence. But I don't know. Holden says, if I was Clark, I wouldn't be happy at all with Hillers either. He has 36-year-old Doughty blocking him. Yeah, no, listen, I've said this time and time again. If you're Brant Clark's agent, never mind Brant Clark, if you're Brant Clark's agent, you have to be livid because you look at the other players that are around Clark's age and around Clark's draft position, and some of them are signing huge contracts. Who was it? The kid in Montreal. Was it Lane Hudson who just signed a massive contract? And I get it. He was the rookie of the year, but he got the playing time and he got the points. And I don't know if Brant Clark would get those points if he got the playing time. There are plenty of people who love to smugly point out when he makes a mistake. See, that's why he doesn't get played. And I get it. Brant Clark is not Drew Doughty. Brant Clark is not as good today as Drew Doughty was when Drew Doughty was his age. But Drew Doughty is a once in a generation player. So if your standard of, that a player has to reach is generational franchise legend, I just think that's a little bit unrealistic and unfair. So yeah, if I was Clark, I would be pissed, but I totally understand the spot the Kings are in with Clark. But to hammer home a point that I've made repeatedly, if your priority is win today, then you will always side with the safe. If your priority is to win long term, you will start to dabble in experimentation. The Kings have been play it safe mode for at least 4.5 years now, and it's come at the expense of the future. And the future is right around the corner, and they haven't put any stock in the future. And now we're about to find out what that gets you. Jody says, "Hi, Jesse, on my break at work. I like you. I'm so sad to know is gone." I see. I, like you, am so sad to know is gone. I get to talk to him last season in Vegas. Yeah, listen, I'm sad. Um, I'm also concerned about the team as a fan, but yes, personally, I'm sad. Bergevin has been here for a while, and don't forget he traded for Phil in Montreal. Says Johnny, yeah, listen, the Bergevin thing, it's convenient, but like I said, I don't know. Bergevin signed in LA. Let me look it up because I keep referencing it and I don't know. But I mean, I feel like he signed he January 9th, 2022. So Phil signed in the summer of 2021. Bergevin joined the Kings as a senior advisor in January of 2022. So July, August, September, October, November, December, January. So 7 months later. So if there's any link between Bergevin and Danault, I don't think that Danault sticks it out for 4 years. Like, I just think that that's a convenient sort of lazy connection to draw. I don't think there's anything to do with it. Bergevin got here right after Danault did. It's whatever. I don't think it matters. What happened in 1819, living things. What happened in 1819 is the Kings made the playoffs in 2018. The first year of head coach John Stevens. They made the playoffs. They had fired Daryl Sutter and Dean Lombardi. It was the first year of Robitaille, Blake, and Stevens. They made the playoffs in 2018. They got swept by, and I'm sorry, I'm falling behind on the comments. They got swept by the Golden Knights, but I think every game in that series was a 1-goal game. Jonathan Quick played incredible, and you had this weird thing where it was like, yes, this is probably the tail end of the cup winning team era, but this Vegas team was on a roll and had come out of nowhere and obviously did very well with the expansion draft and the rules. And the Kings took them, they got swept, but it was close and they played well. And then in the rookie tournament in 2018, they lost every game. In training camp and preseason, I think they lost every game. And people were noticing in the preseason, people were nervous and upset. And people were like, ugh, something looks wrong with this team. And then the wheels absolutely fell off that season. They traded Tanner Pearson early. That didn't work out. Then they fired John Stevens. They brought in Willie Desjardins. The season was a mess. Doughty looked terrible. They fired the coach. At the end of they traded, was it Muzzin that season or was it Martinez in the middle of that season? But like that was the start of the rebuild. And there was never any explanation for how everything fell apart so quickly. It just did. And we've gotten little drips and drabs about, they signed Kovalchuk that offseason, which I always thought was a terrible idea. And I have theories about why that might have played out poorly. But we got drips and drabs from different interviews over the years from different executives that implied that maybe it wasn't a great idea to bring Kovalchuk in. But something happened. I don't know, but that season was a mess. 2018-19 was a mess. And that's why they got the 5th overall pick for Turcotte. Although it should have been, if I remember correctly, it should have been 3rd or 4th overall. But I think New York won the lottery that year. Somebody won the lottery that year, maybe even 2 teams, to bump them to 5th instead of 3rd. That's my recollection, is that 2019, they finished so poorly. They should have had a top 3 pick, but they didn't. They wound up with Turcotte. And that whole draft, Turcotte, Bjornfoot, Kaliev, who else was taken in that year? Spence, I think, was that in 2019? Like, there were a lot of players taken in that draft that were supposed to be the bedrock of the foundation of this club. And I think only one of them is left. Let me just look it up now because, I hate it when I say stuff that can be verified and I don't verify it. So I'm just going to look up the 2019 draft real quick here. The LA Kings in the 2019 NHL draft took Alex Turcotte, Tobias Bjornfoot, Arthur Kaliev, Samuel Fagemo. That's who I was forgetting. Lukasz Parzik, Jordan Spence, Kim Nuzianen, Braden Doyle, and Andre Lee. Turcotte is still here, but has been, he's 35 points in 133 games. Bjornfoot's gone, Kaliev's gone, Fagemo's gone, Parzik is gone, Spence is gone, Nuzianen's gone, Doyle's gone, Lee is in Ontario. So that draft, which was supposed to be this great draft, really just amounted to not at all what it was meant to be. Johnny Utah says trade for Jeannot, sign Edmondson, and promote Hellenius. Yeah, well, that's too late for that. It was the playing 2 lines and 2 D pairs that was what drove me crazy about Hiller in the playoffs. The top 6 and top pair were completely gassed. Yes, and what we have to see now is, now that Danault is gone, and there's all this talk of like, well, now Turcotte and Hellenius will get more playing time. My only question is, well, will they? because we've seen Hiller be reluctant to play full depth on the roster or to try crazy experimental stuff. So will Alex Turcotte get third line center minutes, or will we see Alex Laferriere try to be converted to a third line center? And will we go with Kopitar, Byfield, Laferriere, and Turcotte down the middle? And will Hellenius be relegated to the bench again? If that happens, I'll pull my hair. I mean, what little hair I have left, I don't know. But we have to wait and see. If Turcotte winds up playing 15 minutes a night and winds up playing power play time and penalty kill time and actually replaces Phil Danault and actually puts up points, great, no problem. But all that has to play out. They can play hard for each other. It's up to coaching to put that effort into results. Totally agree. I'm not sure what that is referencing to because I'm way behind on the comments. Apologies. John Zay says, I think he was sandbagging all year to try and force a trade. That would lead me to believe he probably wanted out for a long time, but he felt the need to force LA's hand. That doesn't strike me as who I believe Phil Danault to be. It's possible, but I don't think he was sandbagging. I think he was unhappy, for lack of a better word, and I don't know why. I don't know if anything happened. I don't think it started from the summer. I don't think it started happening in the off season. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think happened in that series then? I'm assuming you're talking about the Edmonton Oilers series because I referenced it a while ago. I think the coaching staff told him to sit back. This is what I think happened. The coaching staff has denied it. The players have denied it, but I have eyeballs. I know what I watched. And I saw a team play an organized defensive shutdown structure that I've literally never before seen in my life. And I also saw a coaching staff, a management staff, and a playing roster all use the exact same language to defend it, which is human nature. That was the phrase. Oh, it's human nature. You get a lead, you sit back. It's human nature. You get a lead, you sit back. It's human nature. And like when you hear the same phrase repeated ad nauseum for a weird situation that you've never seen before, that suggests to me coordination. And I just don't believe it. There's nothing you can ever say to me will make me believe that the coaching staff didn't tell the team to sit back and play defense. Now, if every single person on that roster tells me that that is what happened, that the coaching staff did not tell them to sit back and play defense, that it was 100% on the players, then I will simply shrug and say, well, then the coaching staff didn't do their job by getting them not to. So that's what I think happened in that series. Don't forget, only playing 3 forward lines and 2 D pairs while Edmonton is rolling 12. Yes, that also covered that. That is true. This team has losing lost its direction, and it's manifesting itself in players wanting to leave, not wanting to resign here, and it's starting to show in a very public way. I mean, that might be a little dramatic, but that's the concern. That's certainly the concern is like, yeah, it's Kopitar's last year. He's not coming back next year. So what are we doing? What's the plan? What have I seen to believe that, that there is a plan in place? Because I'm going to tell you, the amount of times that I keep hearing Alex Laferriere's name mentioned as a center candidate while still not playing him at center. Like if they came out and said, you know what, Alex Laferriere is going to be a center moving forward. And then that was it. The next game, it was Alex Laferriere at center, game after game after game, shift after shift after shift. I'd say, okay, that's bold, but I guess I believe in that, I believe that they have faith in that. And that's what we're saying, but we don't see that. We get little hints and little drips and drabs. And, Phil Danault's gone. What are we going to do about the depth? Well, Turcotte, Hellenius, don't forget Laferriere can play center. It's like, well, who? What? Like, really? Laferriere over any of the guys in Ontario? And I don't think anybody in Ontario is a solid solution. But let me just look at my roster here real quick. You've got Glenn Gaudin, Francesco Pinelli, Kenny Connors, Andre Lee, Logan Brown. Like there are guys who can play center in Ontario, but the solution is Alex Laferriere. Like, I don't know. I just don't love it. Rappaport says, wow, forgot about Dursey being his previous writing partner. So his last 2 writing partners. I mean, I guess that's one way of looking at it. Nelly says, aren't there different coaches for different parts of the game? Yes. So it could be possible that the team could still play their defensive game, but still have Hiller lose the room. Yeah, I suppose it's possible that DJ Smith has the guys playing solid defense, but that I don't know. Lose the room is such an awkward phrase to me, and it just I'm still not entirely sure what I think other people think it means. But whatever. All right. Johnny says all signs pointing to Montreal. As soon as the rumors dropped, they needed 2C for a while. Well, first of all, that's just not true, Johnny. All signs did not point directly to Montreal. There were signs pointing to Carolina and New Jersey and, the amount of teams I heard, but yes, Montreal was definitely out there, and for multiple reasons it made sense. What didn't make sense to me was the return. I saw lots of people talking about potential returns, but whatever. For what it's worth, Spence hasn't been scratched since November 8th because he's so good for the Sens. Travis Green has big Hiller vibes sometimes. Yeah, okay. Well, that's good to know. And I mean, I'm just going to look it up because I'm like that, but I want to know what Jordan Spence's numbers are in Ottawa because my hunch is they're pretty good. So I'm going to Natural Stat Trick real quick, and I'm sorry I'm going to vamp while I look this up. But Jordan Spence, Ottawa Senators this season. Let's go ahead and just take a look. I'm doing the submit button and I'm waiting for the website to load. All right, so time on ice, Jordan Spence, 395 minutes, 21 seconds. That puts him fifth in minutes amongst D. 59.82% on Corsi. That's tops for the Senators. Second in Corsi, second in Fenwick at 60.36. Third in shots for percentage behind Brady Tkachuk and Dennis Gilbert. Goals for percentage, let's see, Jordan Spence, number one on the team, 62.5%, 20 goals for while he's on the ice, 12 goals against while he's on the ice. This is all 5-on-5, by the way. Expected goals for percentage, third on the team, again behind Tkachuk and Gilbert. So once again, Jordan Spence proving that whether it's sheltered minutes or not, when you play him in minutes, he performs. And I've said time and time again, to me, it's a question of what do you care about, optics or results? And if you only care about results, or excuse me, if you only care about optics, I think you're crazy. I think you're a lunatic. So I was talking to my dad this morning and he mentioned Jordan Spence. And this is something that he and I just simply disagree on when it comes to hockey. And he said, I think Jordan Spence is too easy to knock off the puck. And maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't know. But I will simply point to the body of work that he has put up in his time in the National Hockey League. And when he's on the ice, the puck is going the correct direction far more often than it's not. And the puck is going into the opponent's net far more often than it goes into his net. So I don't care how tall he is. I don't care how easily he is to be knocked off the puck. He's good. Sorry, this is me being mad about Jordan Spence, neither here nor there. Matt says, I remember that series, 7 goals against, 3 goals for. I went to University of Las Vegas. Yeah, that was the Vegas Kings series in 2018. Yeah, it was a way more competitive series than a sweep suggests. They did get swept though, so they're not going to send you negative test results without a phone call. Don't worry, that's in results to the results I got this morning from City of Hope. Listen, I've already fed the results into one AI interpretation machine, which is dangerous, I know, but it said, my lymph nodes are fine, but my elbow might need an MRI. So who knows? I get to find out on Monday, so I'm very nervous about that. Dowdy wants to play for Canada so bad, trade him to the Leafs. Ha. We'll see. I mean, I'm very curious to know what the Olympics are going to do. Will the team benefit from 2 weeks off? Will the team look the same? I don't know. We'll find out. 2018-19, the beginning of signs of a fledgling franchise philosophy. Getting their ass kicked by Edmonton 4 times in a row has really only magnified how outdated this philosophy has become. I'm not entirely sure that was the start of that philosophy. I think that philosophy started after COVID. I think the problem with 2018-19 was just a lack of faith. We don't have to get into this right now, but I think that team, if left to its own devices, could have gotten better and younger over time. Instead, they went out and got Ilya Kovalchuk, and I think they traded for Phaneuf. When did the Phaneuf trade happen? Did the Phaneuf trade happen at the end of 2018-19 or at the end of 2017-18? The Phaneuf trade was 2018, February 13th, 2018. So Phaneuf trade happened going into that series against Vegas, but bringing in Ilya Kovalchuk was just a terrible decision, and I believe was part of what caused the fall apart. But that's for a conversation for a different day. I'm assuming this comment exactly, will they really play more? I'm assuming is about Turcotte and Hellenius because I said earlier, okay, they should play more now that Danault's gone, but will they? Dougie Doug says if Hiller keeps Turk and Hellenius stapled to the bench, he's basically firing himself. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about firing himself, but it won't be great. And I mentioned this on the post-game show when I said sometimes you ask questions in media availabilities to set up future questions. So when I asked Ken Holland at the quarter pole mark if a general manager ever overrides a coach's decision, this is why that question gets asked. Now moving forward, if between now and the 40 game mark, which is what, 10 games basically, the next time we talk to Ken Holland will probably be at the halfway mark or maybe right before the Olympics. If Turcotte and Hellenius haven't gotten adequate minutes, now it's totally fair to bring up the previous answer of overriding coaches and say, what are you going to do something about this or not? Like, what's the value? Like, it's all part of a piece, and I get it, it's slow moving and it's not satisfying dramatically, but that's why. All right. Don't know if you covered it. Is there any time learned for Darcy to return or still waiting for them to medically clear him? He's on the injured reserve. The rules of injured reserve say that you have to miss, I believe, 7 games. Let me just confirm that. I shouldn't rely on AI in this situation, but I'm gonna, because my understanding is that it's 7 games. Allows teams to temporarily remove an injured player for an active roster to create a roster spot with a minimum time requirement, 7 days for IR, 10 games, 24 days for LTIR. So because Darcy Kemper played in that game, was it Dallas that he got removed? I believe it was. Because he played that game, that can't be the day that he was placed on IR. Like, they can't retroactively put it back to that day. And I believe he was put on IR the following day, which was Tuesday, which means 7 days. Yeah, he was injured in Dallas. Then he was put on IR on the 16th. So 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 7 days is the 22nd. So he's got to be out for 7 days, which means he can be activated on the 23rd. They have a game on the 23rd and on the 22nd. So theoretically, Darcy Kemper could play the second game of that back-to-back set against Columbus and Seattle if he's healthy. If he's not healthy, if he's not cleared to play, well, then holy smokes, do I not have any idea what's going to happen? Because they just played Anton Forsberg in one set of back-to-back games. I can't imagine they would play Anton Forsberg in back-to-back games, which means Phoenix Copley gets in one of those, but has to be seen. We don't know. There seems to be no semblance of a plan, says Holden. I don't want to say that there was no semblance of a plan. I just think there are competing interests. I think the team wants to be good right now. I don't think they're as good as they want to be. And I think in the past, they have made decisions sacrificing the future for the moment, for the present, which is now the past. And so consequently, the present has the options for the present have already been sold for attempts in the past. So now their options are, do you trade draft picks or Greentree or Brustevich or Slakinski or George or whoever? Like, there's not a lot of value in Ontario, no disrespect to any of those guys, but like, I guess you could trade Martin Kromiak if you wanted to, or Dvorak or Kirsanov, but like, what are you going to get for them? Point is, the only thing you can trade right now is futures, and you're going to try and trade futures for roster players in a league where everybody's in quote unquote a malaise. I just don't know what the market is. I think it's crazy. When was the last time I saw Phil Anschutz at a game? Full disclosure, every time I see Mike Murphy, I think it's Phil Anschutz. So I'm probably the wrong person to answer this question. I know what Phil Anschutz looks like in theory, but I'm not sure that I could pick him out of a lineup if you asked me to. I'm told he is very involved. I'm told family members of his are very involved. I don't know. I don't know. I see Alan Walsh there all the time. I know what Alan Walsh looks like. I don't know. I don't know. Spence has looked awesome there in 5 or 6 Sens games I've watched this season. Listen, you guys are going to keep triggering me by bringing up Jordan Spence. Jordan Spence is very good. He just is. And like I said, optics versus results. If you only care about optics, you and I care about different things. It's so obvious that LA needs to start a rebuild. Listen, this is, again, probably not the right time for this conversation, but screw it. We've been going in over an hour and there's 500 of you watching, so I'm just going to do it. Rebuild to me is not the right term, although I've started to go back on that over the last couple of days when I was thinking about it. I think teams need to build. If the Kings want to regain, a place in the competitive part of the league, I think you need to build. And the Kings have not been building for the future. The Kings have been building for the present. So a rebuild around what? When you rebuild, you need pieces to rebuild around. If you think that Quentin Byfield, Brant Clark, and Alex Laferriere and Alex Turcotte and Sammy Hellenius are enough of a foundation to build a competitive team around, more power to you. I'm not convinced. So I think, to the next commenter's part, they don't need a rebuild, they need a retool. I think they have no option but to retool right now. And I think that based on the timeline of Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty, that's your best bet. That is your best chance, given the spot that we're already in. And I was having this fight in a private chat about the Kings the last couple of days. If we just ignore the decisions that have already been made and you just say, okay, what's the best option for today? Like, never mind what should have been, shoulda, coulda, woulda. What about where we are right now? What are your best chances? Anze Kopitar is still your number one center. Drew Doughty's still your number one D. You can nitpick and say that shouldn't be the case or they should have done things in the past differently all you want. That is the case for today. So, yes, right now they need to find a replacement for Phil Danault. That replacement might be Alex Turcotte. It might not, but it might be. They need to figure it out. They don't have a ton of time to figure out if it is Alex Turcotte or not. They have till March, realistically. If it is Alex Turcotte, great, no problem. If it isn't, now they have decisions about what to move to find the replacement. I mean, it might be Sammy Lanius. I don't know. But the point is, the replacement has to come from inside the house or outside the house. And you only have so much time to figure out if it's coming from inside the house. How does an organization look at Spence play and tell him you can't guarantee him a spot, even as a fifth or sixth D, and then replace him with CC? Shake my head, so frustrating. I agree with you. And I don't know this for 100% sure fact, but I am 99.9% sure that the simple answer is CC is taller than Spence. That is my belief. And maybe it's more complicated than that, but that is my belief. My belief is simply that big players are prioritized over smaller players. That's just, and yes, told that CC at like 3 times the amount Spence makes too. I think if you add Gavrikov and Spence's contracts this year, I think it's equal the amount that Dumoulin and CC make. And I get it. It's weird because Gavrikov would have had to sign a long-term contract and Spence was in the final year of his deal, whereas Dumoulin and CC are both signed to multi-year contracts. So it would have been the equal this year, but not future years. But just for this year alone, Gavrikov and Spence make the exact same amount as Dumoulin and CC, and Gavrikov and Spence are a dynamite defensive tandem pair, and Dumoulin and CC are, I'm told they're better than their numbers. So I don't know. The philosophy, Jesse, is overvaluing success that occurred over a decade ago and over relying on the same play structure while the league changed. Yes, and not only that, I said this before recently, when Dustin Brown was still on the team at the end of his career and was not nearly as good as he used to be, I would argue to people that he shouldn't be playing on the top line, that it was a bad sign that the top line was whatever it was, Iafallo, Kopitar, and Brown, or whatever. And people would say, well, who has outperformed him? Who has forced them to give up his spot? And I would say that's not a fair question because you're comparing the ghost of who Dustin Brown was to the reality of who these players are today. Yeah, nobody on the roster is as good as 2012 Dustin Brown. Nobody on this roster is as good as 2012 Anze Kopitar. Nobody on this roster is as good as 2012 Quick or Doughty or any of them. But if you want them to be that good, you have to let them play. 2012 Dustin Brown, Kopitar, Doughty, Quick, etc. didn't wake up one day and were that good. They came in with flaws, and they were anyway. Whatever. All right. Spence over CC all day. How they didn't see that is unsettling. Yeah, listen, I don't want to turn this into the Jordan Spence thing, but sure. Roy, Dersey, Spence, and now Clark, all casualties of sticking with Doughty's entitlement. Okay, I guess I will approach this. I don't think it's Drew Doughty's fault. I don't think Drew Doughty sat there and said, if you don't give me top minutes, I will throw a fit and demand a trade. And then the organization kowtowed to him. I just don't think that's how it worked. I do think the organization gives Doughty minutes that Doughty's very happy with. I just don't think it's as simple as, I don't think it's as transactional as that. I just think it's a coincidence more than a direct demand. Do we have a 1D and 1C that can win a playoff round? Remains to be seen. I'm dubious right now. I mean, Kopitar and Doughty certainly can. They haven't since 2014, so it seems a little bit hard to believe that suddenly they will this year, especially now with reduced depth at D and center. But I don't know. Mike says hi. Hi, Mike. Somebody pummel Rantanen, please. Yes, that we're backsliding a little bit, but yes, that is another thing that is concerning to me, is not only have we lost Phil Danault, but there also doesn't appear to be any desire by anybody to be mad at the other team other than Corey Perry from the bench. So whatever. I think trading any of the very limited number of top end prospects is practically suicide to this franchise's near term future. I agree. I wouldn't do it, but I don't think there are alternatives at this point. They've spent every other piece of capital they have. The only thing they have left to sell are futures, especially now that Phil Danault is gone. The remaining pieces that you could realistically trade that might not immediately impact the team, I suppose you could trade some of the players on the roster. If you wanted to say, you know, Jeff Malott, Andrei Kuzmenko, Trevor Moore, like non-top 6 forwards, okay, sure, fine. But at some point, somebody has to play those minutes. So you're not trading anybody from the roster. Phil Danault was your last big ticket item. So what's left? What's left is first-round picks and guys taken in the first round. Brustevich, Greentree, or goalies. They have a goalie pipeline. That's kind of it. That I've said repeatedly. I think they've painted themselves into a corner, and the corner finally got small enough. And that's it. When you're in a corner, you got issues. Connors is solid. Okay, fine. Connors is solid. I'm replying more to other people than Johnny Utah, but Johnny Utah is the one who put that comment out there. Kenny Connors, fine. There are people who love Kenny Connors and the way he plays. Here's the reality about Kenny Connors. He's 22 years old. He's 6'2". He's 205 pounds. He's a 4th-round draft pick with 25 games of professional experience. In those 25 games, he has 15 points. I'm told he has been very impressive. I hope he is. I hope Kenny Connors is a decent replacement for a bottom 6 player. But if he is, then you know what? Call him up. End this stupid conversation of, oh, this guy is so good, someday he'll be something. You're out of someday. Someday is today. If he's that good, call him up. If Andre Lee is an NHL player and we're so convinced that last year he was going to make the team out of training camp and everybody knows what I'm talking about it, where is he? Why is he Ontario? Let's go. Let's go. Tomorrow's here. We have no more tomorrows. Anze Kopitar is retiring in the summer. That's it. You just traded Phil Danault. Quentin Byfield has a sub 50% face-off win percentage. Alex Turcotte has 6 points, doesn't kill penalties, won't kill penalties, according to Jim Hiller today. Is under 6 foot, is not physically imposing, and has a history of concussions and head injuries. So what are we talking about? Tomorrow is now. If you think you've got something, like, come on. Dursey was trash and gave up way too many goals and cost the Kings games. He was given his chance and failed. I'm not going to get into that right now, but that's certainly one position. What needs to be built more, the roster or team management and culture? Well, I am a personal believer in the idea that if the front office is solid and good, that will trickle down to the team and vice versa. We've seen loads of talented teams derailed by bad management. I think we've rarely seen teams that were really incredible in spite of terrible management. That's my belief. I don't know. There's hard to prove that because you wouldn't know if management was bad if the team was winning, but that's my theory. Holden says, I think Clark can be a franchise foundational defenseman if given proper deployment, but that's about it as far as possible franchise guys on the team. Okay, maybe he can, maybe he can't, but we'll never know until they try, and they're very clearly not going to try. And every time he makes a mistake like he did in the Dallas game, a chorus of people rise up to say, ha, 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 all of you people who say play him, you think you're so smart. You're not. You're dummies. We're so smart. And the cycle repeats, and people like me just shrug and go, okay, fine, I guess. Congratulations on being right about young players making mistakes. Super sophisticated take. Good job, everybody. Are you excited about who is guiding the LA Kings organization? Not particularly. I'm concerned. I think there are a number of, now, just to be perfectly clear, I, as a former employee, and I'll just put it in those terms, I won't go in further into any details on that, but I think everybody can suss out what I mean. Obviously, I'm biased. Obviously, I have a very specific personal position on this question. Having said that, I have said for years, while an employee and not, I think paying attention to the future, it should be and is ipso facto a priority of anybody in any management position. I'm concerned, and I'm running out of ways to not be publicly concerned. It's like the same mistakes that were made after the 93 final. Listen, I wasn't planning on talking about this today, but let's talk about it. The 93 final is sort of a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Bruce McNall was a criminal. Bruce McNall went to jail. Bruce McNall wasn't making payroll after they made a cup run in 1993. I don't know how many people know that story, but Wayne Gretzky was purchased, and I say purchased, not traded for, because $15 million went the other way in that trade, which is not allowed anymore. And that $15 million did not belong to Bruce McNall, and he served prison time for bank fraud. Like, if you look into the crimes that Bruce McNall committed, they are documented and serious. They're not small things. And that's why that team fell apart. As good as it may have been, he couldn't make payroll. So he was making trades because they couldn't afford the players that they were had. The 93 Cup final team was a perfect example of put all your cards on the table, go for it, and hope that it works out. They put all their cards on the table. It didn't work out. And then the floor fell out, because that's what happens when you gamble and you don't plan. The LA Kings in the 90s were a mirage, and that's why the next 10 years stunk. That's why they only had one playoff victory from 93 to 2012. Think about that. One playoff round won between 1993 and 2012, and it was a fluke series win against Detroit. It was an incredible series win against Detroit, but they missed the playoffs in 94, 95, 96, 97, swept in 98, missed in 99, swept in 2000, fluke win in 2001, 7-game loss in 2002, missed in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 6-game loss in 10, 6-game loss in 11, cup win in 12. That's 20 years of miserable hockey thanks to that team. Anyway, I'm mad about stuff that happened way too long ago. Holland builds his teams through the draft and by developing younger players. Okay, well, then I guess 5 years, check in and see if this team has been built. But for now, I'm concerned. Sacrifice all the skill for huge players that can't keep pace. Yeah, that's, yeah. We don't have any elite prospects for the future. Teams build within today. Green Tree George is a start, but the prospect list is so thin. I'm really concerned for the future. Yes. However, I will say this. If we're just talking about the prospect list, let me pull up my list. Wojtek Chihar, Liam Greentree, Carter George, Jared Woolley all have signed entry-level contracts. I imagine Henry Brustevich will sign one before the year is over. Hampton Slukinski is out there. So you've got Brustevich, Woolley as two defensemen. You've got Greentree, Chihaj. You don't have any centers, which is concerning. But maybe Brendan McMorrow or Jimmy Lombardi can turn into something. Christian Epperson's a wing. Like, there's a deep prospect pool. It's not touted, but it's there. And for a franchise that wants to focus on defense first, having dynamite goaltending depth and solid defense is, it's not nothing. Like, if you told me 5 or 6 years from now the LA Kings were a playoff team based on whether it's Lukinski or George and Woolley and Brustevich, okay, I believe it. I'm taller than Spence. Yeah, well, I don't know what you're talking about there, Johnny. All right, sorry, I'm getting lost in the comments here. Rebuilding coming, then get ready for a lot of down years. I mean, that's the fear. That's definitely the fear, is that they were pivoting in 2019 to a rebuild. They had the highest rated prospect pool in the league for 2 or 3 years, and shame on me and everybody that worked for the team for pumping the tires so hard on that prospect pool, only for almost none of it to wind up mattering, or at least not the way that you would want it to. And now we're just at a slightly different place that they were in 2018, which is, instead of Quick, it's Kemper, but it's Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty and Adrian Kempe, and Dustin Brown's retired and Jeff Carter's been traded. But yeah, like, it's kind of, I don't know. It's a little bit, it's whatever. I think they wanted Spence to be more physical, and that is not his game. If that's true, shame on them. Jordan Spence, I'm just going to keep banging the Jordan Spence drum. I'm more upset about the Spence thing than I am the Danault thing. Jordan Spence has strengths. And if you refuse to acknowledge his strengths and play him to his strengths and demand that he play to his weaknesses, that's just poor management for me. Whatever. Clark has already been better than Doughty this season, and it's noticeable. So it's wild to me that Drew still gets that much ice time over Clark. Just how well does he need to play on the first pair? That is a question that I will eventually would love to ask Jim Hiller. Just got a text from somebody involved in the situation. But yeah, listen, I asked Jim Hiller earlier about Alex Turcotte. What does a player have to do in practice to earn more playing time if you're not going to give him playing time during the game to earn it? I don't remember his answer, but it was not a direct answer. But yes, at some point, the question about Clark has to be answered because Clark is another player who doesn't kill penalties and should. Um, 1D and 1C are crucial for success, but having the comparable 2C is the formula. I'll do you one better, Caleb. I think second pair D is probably the most important thing on any hockey team. When the Kings went from 2014 winning the cup to missing the playoffs in 2015, I think the biggest reason is that they lost Mitchell and Voinov. Every team's got a top defensive pair. Not every team has a dynamite second pair. It's depth. I mean, what you and I are basically saying the same thing, but it's depth. It's depth. You win with depth. You don't win with star players. You need star players, but once you get a star player, you have to have depth. The league is littered with the corpses of franchises who had one star player and then not much else. Johnny Utah, Kempe got punched in the back of the head by Greer. Also, don't forget. Oh no, listen. The Kings have been absolutely bullied for whatever 5 years and have sat there and took it. Everybody knows it. It's not a surprise. It's not a secret. And yes, in this particular case, Johnny Utah is 100% correct. The Kings need to be tougher. I don't think tougher means getting a goon. I think tougher means not being, complacent when the other team pushes you around. I don't know if I have a better word for that. All right, you guys are all talking to each other, so I don't want to get in the middle of that. They need to get rid of the current system. It does not win in the playoffs. They bring in a system familiar to Florida as they play defense and push the play. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know what a system is, but yeah, sure. Haha, King's House just told me, did we talk about Danault? Yeah, we talked a little bit. Green Tree, George, Woolley, and Henry B are all going to be studs. I hope they are. I mean, certainly Jared Woolley looks the part, and I have all the faith in the world in Carter George. Henry Brustevich, in the very limited time that I've seen him play, looked very talented, looked very good. And Liam Greentree fits, I haven't watched him play very much, and so I don't have a ton of opinions about him as a player, but the profile fits, right? I look at his numbers, I look at the scouting reports, he seems to look good. Yeah, Jared Woolley, Holden said, does. I just think Jared Woolley is going to be the diamond in the rough, personally, and I'm not the only person to say that, so I'm not trying to pat myself on the back too hard, but Jared Woolley looks good. Do we have the option to restock this year? And I'd rather them do a bit of that instead of just going all in on an aging vet. Well, if you mean by restock, tank and trade current roster players for picks and prospects, yeah, they've got a tremendous opportunity to do that. I don't think they will, but yeah, if you said, okay, we're just tearing it down this year, they have all sorts of options to go ahead and recoup picks and restock. The question is, how far do you go? They've already traded Phil Danault for a second round pick. Do you keep going? Do you just throw the towel in and say, all right, well, screw this. We're trading Anderson and Moore and Kuzmenko and Kemper and and Edmondson and everybody? Like, I don't think so, because at some point you do need players to play. But yes, the option is there. I don't think they'll take it. All right, going through the comments more. Sorry, this is going way longer than I thought it would. But doesn't seem like anybody's leaving. Somebody said I'm on a tear. Thank you. Coaches do not coach or use their players to their strength. Yeah, I think we've talked about it for the last hour and 20 minutes. That seems to be a recurring theme. The late round drafting has been awesome, but they haven't hit on the high end prospects nearly as well. So let's talk about that, because why not? We're talking about everything today. First of all, they traded a lot of high end picks. They traded a lot of first and second round picks I did this math one time and I had the list somewhere, but like from 2008 to like 2019, they just didn't have as many first and second round draft picks because Dean Lombardi was trying to build a cup contender. And then once they won, he was trying to hold on to it. So like the Penner trade was a first round pick. The Lucic trade was a first round pick. The Sekera trade was a first round pick. I'm trying to think of other first round picks. The Carter trade was a first round pick. So, I mean, they've lost a lot of first and second round picks over the years. And then on top of that, and I've said this repeatedly, every time you bring in an Ilya Kovalchuk, every time you bring in a Milan Lucic, every time you bring in somebody like that, Victor Arvidsson, Alex Edler, whatever, those are roster spots that should be taken by those guys drafted in the first and second round that aren't, because you're constantly restocking that spot with veterans. Like, yes, Quentin Byfield and Brant Clark are top 10 picks that are playing for the team right now. So is Alex Turcotte. But Quentin Byfield is not the number one center, although frankly, right now he's playing more minutes than Anze Kopitar is. But let's be serious, he's not the team's number one center. Neither is Alex Turcotte, and that's because Anze Kopitar is still playing. Dustin Brown played until 2022, 23, whatever year it was. Every game he was in the lineup was a game that some prospect wasn't getting those minutes. Scared of Holland spending all the picks we have for something irrelevant this season. I am too, but honestly, if they want to restock the roster covered, that's their choice. That's it. Mike says, no, just that we have 10 picks in the next draft, so we could possibly do both. Maybe. I don't know. Mike says, I don't see us trading more roster players. I can't imagine they will. If they do, I'll say this. This is the most fascinating thing to me about the Danault situation. The Danault situation now creates a fork in the road that always existed, but now it very starkly makes the clear cut. If you replace Phil Danault with an external player, you have clearly chosen one path. If you continue to trade other roster players, you have clearly chosen another path. So what's it going to be? Are we going to stay all in on this season, or are we going to panic and go the other way? There are other options than those two, but that is what is most interesting to me about this trade. Other than Green Tree, none of those forwards project to play in the top 6. Sure, I mean that's a problem, but they also have a draft coming up this year. And honestly, Wojtek Cihar, who just signed his entry-level contract, his profile, if I remember correctly, and then we talked to so many guys about so many prospects, but if I remember correctly, Chiaj is like an Iafallo clone, or maybe that was Epperson now that I'm thinking about it. But either way, he's the second overall pick. He could wind up being a two-way second line wing. But yeah, he's definitely not like a traditional top 6 player. If they're on the outside looking in by the deadline, do you think they push still or trade some of those guys you mentioned more, Kuzi Edmondson? If they're on the outside by the deadline, I don't want to swear, but if they're outside by the deadline, the situation's fucked. Pardon my language. If they're on the outside by the deadline, things have gone wrong and gone sideways, and to a lot of unhappy people in the world. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Jesse confirmed Goon enthusiast. Yeah, sure. I did like the Goon movies, actually, particularly Goon 2, but I don't think the Kings need a Goon. I think the solution is team toughness. I think the power play needs to be the enforcer. Kings need Celebrini, Bedard, or Schaefer type young players. Only way to get them is to tank. I don't disagree with that. It is easier to build around star pillar players than not, and the Kings don't have a Bedard or Schaefer or Celebrini type, and the only way to get them is to get those high draft picks. It's one of the reasons I hate the draft. Kinghouse says, I see Kuzi being traded. I mean, for what, where, why? Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked, but I don't know. What's the hope? If we keep losing, I would expect us to clean house near the deadline. Yeah. I mean, I don't even, honestly, I don't know. I don't know what to expect because I don't know the thought process behind some of these decisions. And as I've said repeatedly, I don't agree with the thought process behind some of these. Pork Chopitis says, hear me out. I really don't want ex-players running the team. They're loyal to the players to a fault instead of being there to a winning team. The country club argument. How would you respond to that statement? I've said repeatedly, I don't think former athletes should be in charge of organizations. And part of the reason why is there's a thing called survivorship bias. I don't want to get into it, but the point is that people misinterpret the results of incidents. So, for example, planes would come back in World War II, and the planes would be full of bullet holes. And the immediate response was, well, let's build planes with more shielding where the bullet holes are. And some very brilliant person, I don't remember his name, said, no, dummies, the planes that are coming back with all the bullet holes survived having all the bullet holes shot in them. The planes that don't come back are the planes that have bullet holes where we don't see because they didn't come back. So put the shielding on the parts of the plane that don't have bullet holes, because presumably the planes that didn't come back got shot in those areas, and that's why they didn't come back. So my point is, it's a very long ramble, I apologize, but if you have an athlete whose entire career went well, and to be clear, let's just take Joe Sakic, for example, who runs the Colorado Avalanche. Now, it's working out for him right now, so maybe this is a bad example, but Take a guy like Joe Sakic or Brendan Shanahan, let's say. When was the last time anything went wrong for them? They've been on a hot streak their entire life. They got drafted high into the NHL. They had tremendous careers. They immediately moved from a career as a player into either the league or front office, and they've gotten paid tons of money to do it. So, what on earth would ever cause them to pause and consider for a second that what they're doing might be wrong? Nothing. And I am a firm believer that you learn more from failure than success. So if I want somebody who is going to run my organization and make decisions and evaluate, which is a word, again, we've heard the organization used multiple times in the last few months. I want somebody who's failed. I want somebody who might have learned from failure rather than someone who's been hitting home runs since they were 12 years old. I don't want somebody for whom everything has gone right. And I personally don't believe that everything goes right for those people by virtue of some magical quality that makes them just uniquely better than everybody else. Like Joe Sakic and Brendan Shanahan were incredible players, but I don't believe that Joe Sakic worked harder than everybody else to be Joe Sakic. Joe Sakic likely did work very, very hard. But I don't believe in the myth that hard work equates directly to success. I believe there is an element of luck involved in it, and I will use myself as an example. Do I work hard? Absolutely. Have I gotten lucky? Absolutely. And I know that there are people who have worked way harder than me who desperately want to be in the industry, who desperately want to have their voice listened to, who desperately want to have a platform and want to be paid attention to and aren't. And I don't know what the difference between me and them is because they work harder than I do and they've been working harder than I have. So, like I said, I want people who have failed. I want people who have learned from failure. I want people for whom the it would even occur to them that they might be making a mistake. And I think professional athletes cannot think that way while they're being athletes, because if you start to self-doubt, you get in your own head and it's a mess. So I think professional athletes in particular breed a kind of never say die optimism that forces you to believe that whatever you do will work out. And then for some of them, it works out, and for some of them, it doesn't. And narratively, we only see the ones that it does work for, and we go, aha, that's the personality trait that caused them to succeed. That never say die, I refuse to give up attitude. We never talk about the guys that played hockey in the ECHL until they were 28 and then finally went and got a job running a cheese shop like Noah Clark did. We just don't talk about them. But are you going to tell me that Noah Clark didn't care, didn't work hard for his hockey career? Like, no chance. So anyway, this is a rant. I apologize, but that is my reaction to that statement. I hope it made sense. Holland and Hiller Holland got Hiller, Armia, and Perry so that he could utilize fourth line. Then he just benches Turk and Kuzmenko instead. He needs to utilize his player better and trust him. Yeah. Not only that, he also got Armia, I thought, to penalty kill, and he hasn't. And that's weird to me. And the fact that we keep talking about what a great job Perry and Armia are doing while ignoring the fact that they're doing a great job because Kuzmenko hasn't been getting playing time because he hasn't been playing well is weird. I just find that weird that, we'll spend a lot of time talking about how great the goaltending and penalty kill and defense is while totally ignoring the fact that they've had to be good because the rest of the game has been awful. I don't know. It just seems weird to me. I don't understand why Kuzmenko does so poorly in second season historically. I don't either. I don't know anybody does. What did the Kings trade to get Kuzmenko? I think it was a third round pick. Now you're going to make me look that up because, like I said, I don't like saying things that are easily verifiable. Andrei Kuzmenko was traded from Philadelphia Flyers with round 7 pick in the 2005 draft to LA for a third round pick in the 2027 draft. So the Kings actually got 2 assets. They got Brendan McMorrow, who I've already talked about and who appears to be a stud prospect. And he was taken in the 7th round. So the Kings got Kuzmenko and a 7th round pick for a third round pick in the future. So that, I don't know, is a pretty good trade as far as I'm concerned. Third round pick in Philly. Somebody said, and Philly retained 50%, but that's old news. Now they're paying Kuzmenko what they're paying him. Definitely that, a lot of ego and confirmation bias. Yes. Great ramble. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the comments. This has gone way longer than I thought it was. I thought I was going to be on here for like 10 minutes and say, yeah, Kopitar. Oh, that was another thing. Kopitar didn't practice today. Maybe he practices tomorrow. I was personally disappointed, and I don't know, maybe I'll get a slap on the wrist for saying this, but like, you're the captain of the team. The alternate captain got traded after weeks swirling of rumors that he demanded a trade. I wanted to talk to Kopitar today. I wanted to ask him about that. didn't get a chance to. Maybe he'll be there tomorrow, in which case I retract all that. But I don't know. I was disappointed. Ryan O'Reilly for 2 second-round picks, the one we got for Phil and ours. Yeah, I mean, okay, fine. If they do that, if they make a move with the pick to recoup a player to replace Phil Danault, I will pivot from being disappointed and upset to evaluating that trade at that point. If it is for Ryan O'Reilly, then okay, we'll deal with that as it comes. Right now, I'm looking up how old Ryan O'Reilly is because if I'm not mistaken, he's 35. He's 34. He'll be 35 in February. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul again. Like Ryan O'Reilly's a little bit older than Phil Danault. Um, I don't know how much better he is, but he's definitely having a better season. And let me just go ahead and look at his cap situation because that has to be taken into account as well. Ryan O'Reilly is currently in the third year of a 4-year contract. He makes $4.5 million. So if they were to acquire Ryan O'Reilly at no cap, at no salary retention, you'd be getting a 34, 35-year-old player with one more year left on his deal at $4.5 million. It sort of solves the short-term problem, but I'm not sure what it does long-term. Someone says, friend says, I'm behind on the stream, but Lombardi having a breakout season and has the third most face-off wins in the OHL. Okay, thank you. That's great. That's Jimmy Lombardi, who was drafted by the Kings. Yeah, I mean, I think they have good players. I think they have drafted good players. I'm eager to see how all of them develop and turn. Want decision makers who are willing to grow as the game grows. Yes, that is also part of it. And ultimately, that might have been part of Dean Lombardi's downfall, right? Dean Lombardi was convinced that there was one way to win. And when it was perfectly clear that he didn't have the horses to win that way, he didn't pivot. He just kept going with lesser horses. Now, I don't necessarily believe that he was wrong that there's only one way to win. Well, actually, there clearly are multiple ways to win. I don't think Dean Lombardi's wrong that his way would have continued to work. I just think that he lucked out with a roster full of players specifically designed to play that way. And as they started departing, he couldn't replace them with players that could fill the roles. They never replaced Justin Williams. They never replaced Rob Scuderi, Willie Mitchell, Slava Voinov, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like those guys left and, sorry, but almost retired Vincent Lecavalier, Luke Shen, Milan Lucic, etc. were not good enough. So anyway, whatever. I played roller hockey with Noah Clark. We talked to Noah Clark recently. I like Noah Clark, but like I said, I don't think it's his fault that he wasn't Dustin Brown. I don't think the owner of the Kings wants to put enough money to really go after Stanley Cup. Nothing has happened since Gretzky. I understand where somebody might reach that conclusion. I don't think it has anything to do with money. The team spends a lot of money, and not just on roster players, but like on travel, on infrastructure, advertising, business ops. Like the team spends money. I don't believe it's that the ownership is cheap. My concern is how the money is spent, because budget is one thing, allocation is another. And the budget has always been there. It's the allocation. It's how the money is spent. It's where the money is spent. And more importantly, and I've said this so much, I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but more than money, the three most valuable things in a person's life or in an organization's life are time, energy, and focus. And I am not being novel or deep here. This is just go check the Western canon and see how many novels, poems, TV shows, movies, social media posts have been made about this. You can't get time back. You can't get energy back. And every time you focus on one thing, you do so at the exclusion of everything else. So yes, money is important, but more importantly is what you focus on. And if you are focusing on the wrong things, and if you are wasting time and energy on the wrong things, that's just as dangerous as not spending money. Anyway, that's just my personal philosophy. Armia and Perry were solid pickups, but CC Dumoulin were awful. Does Holland have a good eye for forwards, but not defensemen, or what? I don't know. Somebody challenged me the other day to look at all the trades Holland made while the general manager of the Oilers and asked how many of them were bad. I kind of did a cursory glance through. I don't know. I think he actually did a fairly good job in Edmonton. But again, just to backtrack a little bit, time, energy, and focus, they didn't focus on goaltending, or they didn't focus correctly on goaltending. They put too much time and energy on forwards and scoring and not enough on defense and goaltending. And they thought one trade for Ekholm was going to be enough. Now, having said that, they made it to the Stanley Cup final in back-to-back seasons, and one year it went 7 games. So, I mean, they did something right. So there's that. O'Reilly's still an awesome player, way better than Danault has ever been. In your opinion, and you love to know. That's fine. I mean, listen, if they go out and get Ryan O'Reilly, I will have a different position. I'll have to evaluate what the team looks like at that point, because we're assuming that they just trade picks for O'Reilly, and that might not be the case. Nashville might want to get more than picks. If it's Carter George for Ryan O'Reilly, do we still feel the same way? If it's 2 second-round picks for Ryan O'Reilly, that sounds like a pretty good trade. But if I bought a brand new mansion for $5, that would also be a pretty good deal. Good luck, finding somebody in California who wants to sell me a mansion for $5. It's because Hiller doesn't treat Kuzmenko the same way he did when he got here. It's inconsistent coaching and affects the player's game. He refuses to punish anyone else that was in the top six. I believe that inconsistent treatment of players has been an issue for this franchise for many years. Todd McClellan spoke openly about the fact that players get treated differently, and he spoke about it as if it was fine and explainable and made sense. And I never agreed with it. I don't think you can treat players inconsistently. I won't say differently. I don't think you can be inconsistent with people under you if you're in management, leadership, a parent, whatever. I don't think you can be inconsistent and maintain respect and control of your charges. So if you say, well, this player has X amount of money in his ATM, like Todd McClellan used to, and this player doesn't. So therefore, this player can make all sorts of mistakes all over the ice, never lose a minute of ice time, but this player has nothing in his ATM. So if he makes a mistake, he'll be punished for it. They wouldn't use the word punished. They would use language that made it seem like it made sense. It doesn't. It's crazy. And that is bad. In my mind, that is bad coaching. Inconsistency is bad as far as I'm concerned. And I do think it's a concern. And if you want to know why certain players aren't here anymore, I would be willing to bet that there's something to that. But that's speculation on my point. Nelly says, thanks, got to run. I know your results will be fine. See you on Monday. Listen, that's going an hour and 40 minutes. So I appreciate everyone who's stuck in for all of it, and appreciate everybody who's joined and stayed, because it looks to me like there's almost 700 people right now. And I appreciate you all listening to me rant. I really wasn't planning on doing this long. All right, going through 143 Drive, LA to Ontario. Gonna have to take the stream to the car. Yeah, no, I'm not going to Ontario. Ekholm was a really good trade for Edmonton. Holden, you're right. And like I said, the results are there in Edmonton. They went to the Cup Finals twice. So I mean, somebody was doing something right. Demoting Kuzmenko to the third line and second power play unit after scoring would affect anyone's confidence in game, and inconsistent line mates who have no chemistry with him. He's a skilled forward who should play with other skilled forwards. Not only that, Ryan Rinn, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. Not only that, because I agree with the overall sentiment, but also if you are a younger player, if you're Alex Turcotte or Sammy Hellenius or Jeff Malott or Corey Perry, who's 40 years old, and you see that hard work and effort and success on the ice is treated, again, inconsistently, even if you don't register it consciously, I have to believe that over time, the long-term impact is that subconsciously you register it and you realize, and I will say this about myself rather than talk about other people. When I find myself in a situation where there's no reward for working harder and there's little actual punishment for not working hard, I won't work hard. Or I won't work as hard. And I'll give you a specific example as long as I'm talking about myself. When I edit an episode of All the King's Men, my preference, my desire to do a good job is to include a highlight on the front end of an All the King's Men episode. So when the intro music plays, you hear a highlight. Like, so for example, we did the Adrian Kempe interview recently, and I put 2 highlights of Adrian Kempe goals in between the intro where it says you're listening to All the King's Men. Now here's your host, Jesse Cohen. That's my preference. That's how I think the show should be done. Nobody told me to do that. Nobody told me that's how it should be done. That's my personal idea of the best way to do that show, is to give a little bit of an audio clue. This is what you're going to listen to. Here's the intro, blah, 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 moving on. Then after that, I like to have a little bit of an intro where I personally speak to the audience and say, hi, I'm Jesse Cohen. Thanks for listening. This is what you're going to hear 30 seconds, 45 seconds before I go directly to the long-term audio for the episode. I discovered many years ago that if I didn't do that, nobody cared. So sometimes if I'm tired, I don't do it. Because if nobody cares, There's no punishment for not doing it, and there's no reward for doing it. Nobody says, hey, good job. I really love that you do this one thing that only you care about and nobody else notices. So sometimes I don't do it. And every time I don't do it, I feel kind of bad. I feel like I'm kind of cheating people, even though there's a part in my brain that says, nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention. This is just for you. This is only you. But that's the difference between consistent oversight and inconsistent oversight. If you are not rewarding, if you're not catching all the little things that people are doing and rewarding them for it, and you're not punishing them for not doing little things, and by punishing, I mean really punishing. I don't mean reduction in ice time. I mean sent to Ontario, traded, contract bought out. Like, if you can just show up and keep working and collect your paycheck and make millions of dollars to live in the South Bay, and if you play a bad game, the only penalty is that maybe you play 30 fewer seconds. That's not really a punishment. Um, if it happens that your ice time is cut so much that your next contract might be impacted, that's a punishment. But anyway, the point is, like, I just think subconsciously, if there's no reward for doing things right and there's only a limited penalty for not doing things right, over time, you just start taking shortcuts. And shortcuts is how things fall apart. And that's my concern, is that we're seeing shortcut after shortcut taken, and I have all sorts of dumb examples that only matter to me, but I just see them all over the place and I start to get nervous, and I just go, yeah, it's shortcut after shortcut after shortcut after shortcut. Who's catching these shortcuts? Is anybody saying, hey, what's going on here? So when Alex Turcotte is winning more than 50% of his faceoffs and the coach says, no, we're not going to play him on the penalty kill, it's like, well, then what is his reward for doing what you for playing well, winning faceoffs, improving as a player, and developing as a player, a 5th overall pick who signed a harsh deal that wasn't beneficial to him financially. I heard a lot of people criticize him for that deal. He didn't have any control over Phil Danault getting traded. He couldn't have foreseen Phil Danault gets traded, but Phil Danault does get traded, and there's an opportunity to reward him with a new role unforeseen by him previously, right? When Alex Turcotte was drafted, despite what some people might tell you, he wasn't drafted to be a third line center, bottom six / penalty killer, but that's where we are now. Maybe he could be, if the decision was made to reward him for doing the things that he's doing, maybe he could be that player. But we've heard pretty explicitly that that's not going to happen. And so if you're Alex Turcotte or anybody coming up behind him, around him, and you say, so for 3 months, we've been hearing all this talk about him attending the meetings. That's the other thing. He said he's attended penalty kill meetings. He's invested in that process, and it's not happening. So subconsciously, why wouldn't he just take the foot off the gas? And this is where people will tell me, oh, because he's a professional athlete, you don't understand how they're wired. They're blah, 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 blah. To which I just respond, I do understand. They're human beings. They're people. And I'm not a professional athlete, so I've never been that, but I care about things that I do. And like I said, I just told you how I take weird shortcuts on things that only matter to me, that I used to spend a lot of time. I used to spend hours picking the music to play on an episode of every episode of All the King's Men. I would spend hours going over songs. What's the perfect song for this? Can I hide a message in this? They're playing New York. Can I put in a song that matches New York? And eventually I realized it doesn't matter. And not only does it matter, I can't do it. Not allowed to do it, because if I do it, ASCAP will come and sue. Anyway, the point is the show suffered from it. So yeah, that sort of thing registers with players. I'm totally ranting and raving right now. I apologize. Okay, people are talking about stuff. I don't even know what people are talking about in the comments anymore. Leaving to go watch pro blind hockey will be more entertaining than a normal Kings game. Have a good weekend. Thank you, Matt. Good luck with the hockey. Kuz was awarded with a $5 million contract. He came in and was not productive. That was Kuz, not the coach. Could be little from column A, little from column B. Not sure. Yeah, Caius, thank you for reminding me. I need to do this. I hate doing it, but please subscribe on YouTube. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and all that. Yes, and I might as well sneak this in at the 1 hour, 48-minute mark. At some point, I'm going to start passing around a collection plate. I haven't quite yet decided how I'm going to do it or what I'm going to ask people to pay for. None of this will go behind a paywall. It'll all still be free, but like, I do put a lot of time and effort into this, and at some point I'm going to start asking for money. Apologize for that, but it's the truth. All right, last comment, and then I think I'm going to wrap, because we're almost at 2 hours and I've said a bunch of stuff I probably shouldn't have. 100%, this is the number one problem with the organization right now. Young guys aren't rewarded for hard work / could play nearly as much as they should, even when vets struggle or play worse. Yeah, I couldn't really have said it much better than that. And you know what? I'll tag this on. Kings need players who play better than their contracts. Sure, but playing better than your contract means getting played more than your contract suggests. Guys are paid for what they did in the past. If you want them to outperform their contracts, you need to give them an opportunity. You can't sign a guy to a 2-year, extension of his entry level contract, pay him league minimum, and then play him 3 minutes a game and expect him to outperform a league minimum contract. That's crazy. That it's not going to happen. I think Alex Turcotte might make less than league minimum next year because he signed a deal when the league minimum was lower, which is always a weird thing that I never quite understood. But I'm just going to look up Alex Turcotte's contract because if I'm not mistaken, he's on a 3-year, 2-way deal, which means that at any moment they could send him to Ontario and he would make. Nope, sorry, take it back. Last year he would have made less than the minors. This year Alex Turcotte is making $775,000. He signed to that contract next year too. So again, where's the incentive for Alex Turcotte to work harder if he's not going to get rewarded for the work he's already done? He's signed for this year and next year, and it's to a league minimum 2-way contract. So if he works hard, will he be made the second line center and have an opportunity to earn a $4 million contract? Not this coming summer, but in the summer of 2027? Maybe. But is there any evidence to suggest that he would be? I don't know. So that's whatever. All right. I keep saying final comment, and then it's not the final comment, so I'm a liar. There is a conspiracy that Perry was running his mouth after a late game penalty at the end of the game to give the PK some time to rest. Thoughts? If that's true, brilliant move on his part. I hope it's true, because otherwise I think he was just wasting time. Maybe he just knew he wouldn't get any time in overtime. So if the game went to overtime, he was done anyway because he had gotten his penalty. So he wanted to go and get changed. I don't know. It was on the road, so it's not like he could have got home. So I don't know. How do you expect a player to flourish when you constrain them into a role and don't allow them to grow into their potential? Exactly, Jane. That's kind of the point. Like, if you draft a guy, and I said this time and time again, and that's what made those King Cup teams so dynamite. Jonathan Quick, there's nobody standing in his way. He didn't have to be better than anybody. Andrei Kopitar didn't have to be better than anybody. He was, as it turns out, way better than everybody. But he also didn't have to, it wasn't, we can't put Kopitar as the top line center because what will happen to Michael Hanzus's minutes? It was Andrei Kopitar's 19 years old and he's clearly very good. Let's put him in the number one center position and see if he gets better. And he did. He got way better. Thank God. Kings have a lot of players from the 2022 season. They need to start moving on from these players. I think you might mean 2012. I'm not sure. 2022, they don't have that many players left on from that season, but they need to start moving on from, I don't know. I don't know what they need to start moving on. Quick had to beat out Bernier. I guess, but basically Jonathan Quick played 3 games. If I have this correctly, he played 3 games. He was called up. He was dynamite in his first start. And then if I remember correctly, the next year he played like 40 something games. And then if I remember correctly, the next season he played 72. Like, Jonathan Quick showed up and pretty quickly he went from 38 games in the ECHL in 2007, 2008 to 72 games for the Kings in 2009, 2010. So he didn't have to beat out a ton. And in 2008, 2009, he played 44 games with a 2.48 goals against and a 0.914 save percentage. And Bernier didn't even play that season. It was Erzberg and LaBarbera backing up Jonathan Quick. So, he didn't really have to beat out Jonathan Bernier. He just had to beat out Erzberg and and whoever I just said. I can't even remember the other name I just said. But like I said, none of those guys had veterans in their way. And even if Quick did have to beat out Bernier, and even if you want to say Kopitar beat out O'Sullivan, they weren't veterans. It was an actual race between similarly aged players. Quick was drafted in 05. Bernier was drafted in 06. He didn't have to beat out Roman Cechmanek. He didn't have to beat out, Matthew Garon, right? Like, it's anyway, we're coming up on 2 hours. I want to have lunch. I want to give my throat a rest. This is way longer than I thought it was going to go. We covered a lot of topics. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Like I said, it's almost 700 people. I really appreciate it. We're going to keep doing these. There'll probably be one tomorrow because there's going to be a practice, and I imagine something will happen. Maybe not. Monday's game, I will hope to attend. But as I said earlier in the show, I got the results of a PET scan, and I am not a doctor. I don't know how to interpret results of PET scans, but there's some language in there that makes me a little uncomfortable. So if the results, I talked to my oncologist on Monday. If the results are bad, I'll probably be curled up in the fetal position, sucking my thumb. So I probably won't go to the game on Monday. If the results are good, I'll be at the game on Monday feeling great and, acting like everything's fine. So I guess stick around and find out. But thanks for tuning in. And like I said, we will be doing this tomorrow. There is a practice tomorrow. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate the questions and comments. You really gave me stuff to talk about, because otherwise there would have been nothing to talk about and I would have just been rambling. So anyway, go Kings go. And good luck to Phil Danault and everybody else. Talk to you guys soon.